Wallace actually appears in our history books a fully grown man. We know very little about his early life, but certainly in 1297 he raised the banner of revolt, young men flocked to his banner, he slew the Sheriff of Lanark and then joined forces with Andrew Murray, and together they defeated an English army very heavily at Stirling Bridge in September of that year. The following year, Edward, King of England, or Longshanks as he was known, brought his army north to teach the Scots a lesson. The two armies met on a hillside near Falkirk, where after a bloody battle the Scots were defeated. Wallace resigned his guardianship, and from then until his capture 7 years later, the details of his life are sketchy. It is known that he went to France and perhaps Rome to plead Scotland's case to the Pope. On his return, he fought against increasingly overwhelming odds. He was finally captured at Rob Royston near Glasgow in August 1305.
Close my eyes for the last time under Caledonian skies, with my good friends gathered all around me to say their last goodbyes. But I will not be forgotten in the heart of every Scot. I still live on. Now it's time to fly the South-Tide high. My spirit's coming home.
This is where the man was actually captured 700 years ago to this very day that we're standing here. And he was betrayed by a Scot, Sir John Stewart of Menteith, and Wallace was asleep here in the barn at Rob Royston Mains, just to the north of Glasgow, and it was here he was captured and taken south.
As now I'll never go away.
The Wallace Walk is to remind us, all of us, Scots at home and Scots abroad, that we still have a lot of work to do. And that is of momentous importance. If we do not wake up to the fact that all of us want to be free individual living in a free country, in a free Europe, if people don't wake up to this, I think Scotland will be finished within a very short time.
We're here 700 years to the day since Wallace's capture, and it makes me actually put my mind back in what transpired here 700 years ago this very day. And you think how it must have been. We don't know the time. It's probably during the night that Wallace was actually pulled out into the night air. And he wouldn't have known, of course, what was going to happen from here. He would have probably been surprised to find that he was going to go all the way to London in a show trial. When Wallace grew up, Scotland was in charge of its own destiny. He saw that change in his lifetime. And the only thing I can hope for here is that we can reverse that. And I would like to think that in our lifetimes, Scotland again will resort to being a free nation. We can rewrite history. It's within all our capabilities to do it. I don't know what the weather was like in the day. As you can see, it's windy, it's overcast today. Good weather for walking, I've got to admit. I'd rather it was like this than it was hot. But I'm sure the weather was the last thing in Wallace's mind on the 3rd of August, 1305. Scotland matters to me. I know it matters to all of you. And I know it matters to you the way it did to William Wallace, and we should never forget that. It burns in our hearts and it burns in our souls. We should wake up in Scotland. There should be pride again in Scotland. And my hope is that instilling the spirit of William Wallace back in Scotland, that some sort of pride will ensue. I'd like to thank every single one of you for coming here today, because I know what Scotland means to you all. And I think we should all reflect for a moment and think of the events that happened here 700 years ago and how the great man came to an end here. And I'd like to thank you all very, very much for turning up to see me off. Thank you.
This is my land. I stand beside my brothers.
History is for more than scholars. And I think that's why the story of Wallace is so important to me, to bring it to the people of Scotland. Wallace and Scotland are entwined. Wallace made Scotland. He is Scotland. He's all that's best and truest in our national life. And the walk is my way of bringing the story back to the people of Scotland, the story of Wallace. And to raise publicity, of course, is why I set out to do this in the first place. And my life is intertwined with that of Wallace, just as Wallace is intertwined with Scotland. Because the story of Wallace, of course, means that one word, that one simple word. And it means what it means to the people of Scotland, and that word, of course, is freedom.
This day brings a Scottish dawn.
I'm leaving here today, the 700th anniversary, which is the 3rd of August 2005, and that gives me 19 days. Wallace appeared in London on the 22nd of August, and so it's my hope that I'll be walking into London in the morning of the 22nd of August.
Scotland's sun.
Wallace would have been dragged to London in his bare feet. At least I can wear my Nike trainers, and I'll be eating good meals, which of course is important. But it's not just a case of doing this. There was a lot of training had to take place, and in my case that took me back to 2003. I'm doing the walk for Wallace in commemoration of William Wallace, the man himself. He was captured in Scotland and was dragged all the way to London, whether on foot or horseback, and I am actually going to retrace his steps. Most of the guys in my local gym know what this walk undertakes and what it involves, and so therefore they have been pushing me to the limit. Not just in the walking that I do every day, but I go to fitness classes, I do a lot of weight training, etc. And all the boys in the gym have been brilliant at spurring me on as much as they can. When I reach London, hopefully I'll meet up with many other Scots who have made this pilgrimage, and we will actually march the route through London on the 700th anniversary to the day, the 23rd of August 2005. It's a Tuesday. We will march the 6 miles that Wallace was dragged through London to his place of execution, and there will be a full funeral service held for the man. The shocking thing is Wallace is Scotland's great national hero, yet he's never had a commemoration or a funeral of any sort, and I can't really imagine that happening in any other country on the planet. So I want to prove that it may take us 7 centuries, but we don't forget.
When all they really want to do is wish us all good morning.
This is the reality. Scottish summer. Waterproof's on the Scottish summer. And that's basically me. I need to achieve 20 plus miles every day to sort of keep on target. Hopefully I'll be able to hit about 25, but I need to achieve that to basically keep on a sort of time scale. I don't want to start to lag behind.
For days I have walked across the moorland.
My first stop for tonight at least will basically be as far as I can possibly manage, but without going to extremes. There's no point in pushing yourself in a stupid manner, because at the end of the day I'm just going to do too much for all the other days. If I can get a good 20 odd miles done today, I'll be happy.
To hold my son. This day brings a Scottish dawn, and freedom is the right of every man. We give our all here today.
It's the first morning, just woken up, standing outside the van as you can see, and was walking until well into the night last night just to get away from it all. It was a media circus yesterday, and I gave them 5 or 6 hours of my time in the morning. The phone just went non-stop, my mobile just went non-stop. Can we follow you, can we come after you in a van, we want to speak to you more, but of course it was eating into my time, and I've got such a tight time schedule, and so it was just a case of eventually having to turn the phone off. I mean, I'm doing this for publicity, but at the same time I want to be able to continue the walk and get it done in the time scale allotted. So I got a good mileage done yesterday, a good mileage, and we just pulled into a lay-by last night eventually, and curled up and went to sleep, and Dennis has looked after me superbly. By the time I reached the van, he had steak and potatoes with mushrooms and everything ready that he'd cooked in a wee stove in the back of the van. Quite extraordinary. But I just hope that I get some peace to walk today, because as I say, a media circus, and it's amazing that there is that amount of interest, but it can't go on like that, because I would never get any walking done. So first morning, this is the 4th, the morning of the 4th, and I'm hoping, of course, I'll go out, it's early yet, but I'll go out and get 10 miles done, a rest, and then get another 10 miles plus done. So here we go.
Say, this is our land, and we are Scotland's sons. Now we make our stand together. We may fear, but
Here I go, into England.
we will pay the cost. How many good friends will be lost? Tomorrow our flag will fly again. This day brings a Scottish dawn, and freedom is the right.
That's me in England now, and this is actually a pertinent spot, much more so than just being the border. I'm crossing the border here, because this that we're looking out on here is the flats round the Solway Firth, and it was over at the far side there, just at the other side of the water, that Edward Longshanks died. What used to happen in medieval times is the armies would wait till the tides went out. These huge armies of invasion from England would wait till the tide went out, and they would gallop across the sands there before the tide come back in, and it was much better than going across the bogs here a wee bit further east. So Longshanks was here in 1307, 2 years after Wallace died in 1305, and he had a huge army there, probably 50,000 men, and they were all over there ready to invade Scotland. And he breathed his last. He had a stroke and he breathed his last. So he died looking at Scotland, but not standing on Scottish soil, which pleases me greatly, as you can imagine. But there's something quite ironic about passing this spot to commemorate Wallace in the 700th year, and knowing that Longshanks, his great enemy, died just over there. Longshanks asked that after he died, his body be boiled so that the flesh came away from the bones, and the flesh could be discarded wherever it happened to be thrown, I suppose. But he wanted his skeleton carried before his army of invasion till the last Scot was crushed underfoot. Never happened, of course. His son Edward II had Daddy sent down to Westminster, where he still lies. And Edward II did invade.
But he only went as far as Cumnock before he said, sod this for a game of soldiers, and went back to England. And Cumnock still has that effect in people.
We are long gone, our sons of sons will say, they stood behind the bruise, not for greed and not for gain, but on the Sportstone field they died.
That's me in Carlisle now. And Carlisle being the sort of most northerly English city and just across the border, there's a bittersweet relationship here for most Scots, because I'm outside the mighty keep of Carlisle Castle here. It was built in the 1080s, so it was old even in Wallace's day. Wallace was here during his invasion of England in the winter of 1297-98. He tried to take the place, but it was too tough a nut for the Scots to crack, because we never had the siege engines or the money to take somewhere like this. He was here again in much more unfortunate circumstances in 1305. The one sort of sure bit we know of Wallace's route to London was that he was brought here to Carlisle Castle, where he was handed over to fresh guards under the command of Sir John de Seagrave. And Seagrave was responsible for taking Wallace south. And I realise how trussed up he must have been, because I'm quite sure Seagrave didn't want to answer to Edward Longshanks and say, I've lost William Wallace, he's escaped. Seagrave took him south and brought him north again, because Seagrave was the man that was responsible for distributing Wallace's body parts around Scotland. There's a lot of Scottish history tied up in this place, very little of it good. When Wallace reached here, he would have known that there was no way back, that he was well over the border. When Robert the Bruce started his uprising against English rule, two of his brothers were captured and their heads were spiked up there on top of that tower. Mary Queen of Scots was here. She was here before she was taken deeper into England and the rest of her life spent in captivity. Bonnie Prince Charlie left a detachment of his men here in his march north, and the English had them all disembowelled, every one of them, at the gates of this place in 1745. It's only 250 odd years ago, you know. And so it's a sign of lordly power, but at the same time I think to most Scots it's got a grim aspect to it, because so much of what's bad has happened to Scotland, has happened over the centuries, has happened here.
And we've taken all that any nation can. We give our all here today, so our children can say, this is our land, and we are Scotland's sons. This day brings a Scottish dawn, and freedom is the right of every man. We give our all here today, so our children can say, this is our land, and we are Scotland's sons.
Well, oh God, it's been a real push on to reach Derby, but I wanted to reach Derby because, again, the significance. Out of all the armies of invasion from Scotland that went south into England, Bonnie Prince Charlie's got the furthest in 1745 when he reached Derby. And they turned back because the propaganda machine had told them there was 3 English armies tracking them, which wasn't really true. But for better or worse, they turned back. But of course, I have got the added bonus that I can go forward. And so I'm going to push on for Leicester next from Derby, and take the route I suppose that Bonnie Prince Charlie would have liked to have taken if it hadn't all come to a halt for him. But while you're here, I suppose I might as well show you what I sleep on top of, because this here is my bunk here that Dennis so kindly built for me, because it's on this wooden platform, as you can see, and there's a reason for this, because if I just pull the stuff out the road for a moment and lift this, you'll see that actually underneath where I'm sleeping is where Wallace's coffin for the church service in London is lying. And so it's going down south, and it's strange I'm sleeping on top of it, but nothing macabre about it. You know, I'm happy it's there, I'm happy it's where it can be looked after, and I'll be happy to be bringing it home and bringing it north again after the service in the church, full of all the notes and bits and pieces that people bring with them. But it's a symbolic coffin, of course, it's purely symbolic, but I'd like to think that I'm doing this for all the right reasons, and that I understand Scotland the way that Wallace understood Scotland. Now that Derby's been reached, there's only 130, maybe as little as 125 miles to London. And at the rate I've been covering, because I've never really had a day that's dropped under 25 so far, 5 days. 5 days and I've hit London. There have been days it's been 33 miles, that's been my best, it's been 33, there was a 32, and the high 20s is sort of average. I don't think I've been under 25 per day. We go obviously just by the mileometer in the van, but it's taken its toll to a certain extent on my feet. Physically I feel much better than I would have expected to, because there's still strength, my legs aren't sore or anything like that. It's got to the stage when I'm taping up my toes and taping up my heels every morning, just wear and tear rather than rub. But just knowing that this is as far as anybody's ever got before, and knowing that London's only 5 days away, you know, 5 days and it's done, and I've done it, and be ready then, I suppose, for the service in London, big time.
And if we die here today, we die for Scotland's sons.
Well, I finally made it into central London. The outskirts have been a long, wearisome slog of about 20 miles, but I'm through that now. And as you'll see behind me here, you can actually see the sign that says Central London, Paddington. I've only got another 3 or 4 miles to go to the Thames now, and so once that's done and I put my hands on that railing at Westminster, I know I'm basically there. So central London at last, I'll tell you, it has been a slog, it has been incredibly hot. Whether I'll ever walk again is another story after this. I can't believe I've done it. Now this is only the Sunday evening, so I'm actually early, but I have so much TV and media to do tomorrow. I'm actually a day earlier than Wallace, or at least an evening. I'm the evening before, but I'm here and I've done it, and no doubt I'll have to do some of it again tomorrow. I played on for the media, but central London, and here we are. I often wonder how Wallace would feel about me reaching London. I hope at least he's up there somewhere looking down, and he knows that some of us in Scotland still care very much about who we are and where we came from. There's never ever been any sort of commemoration for Wallace's life, so I'm hoping I've at least put a little bit of that to rights. Everyone in Scotland knows that this is the 700th anniversary of our national hero. And that was all I set out to do. People were like, this is the 700th anniversary. And because I've managed to make a whole nation know that, of course it's worthwhile. Well, I'm hoping there'll be a good turnout tomorrow. And with the good Scottish spirit that's inherent in some right-thinking people in Scotland, I don't think weather worse than this would put them off.
When I arrived at Westminster Hall to see that sea of saltires and so many people, people later said there was probably about 1,000 had gathered, and it was a Tuesday, it was during the week, people had to get time off their work. That shows you what Wallace means. And when I pulled up and saw that, and then when we all moved inside the hall, I stood on the exact spot that Wallace stood. I looked down that hall 700 years to the day and seen it as he saw it, because it's still there is no glass that's in the windows. The hall hasn't changed that much. And just to see the passion, to see the colours of Scotland, and to be able to say a few words, it was just so humbling. I can't put something like that into words. The connection was there for all of us, and the 7 centuries just disappeared.
You have no idea how it feels to stand here, as he did 700 years ago to this very day, on this spot, and look down this hall at that same window. All men die. Not all men really live. Scotland has unfinished business. 700 years on, there has never been any sort of remembrance for Wallace. We're going to put that right today. I know why you're here. I know what is in your hearts. Because what is in the hearts of every single one of you is what is in my heart. And it was what was written across the heart of William Wallace himself. And every single one of you here has created the bond. He died far from home and alone. No one there for him in his agonies at the end of the day. We're here now. We're here now. We've come to London. We're going to do the job. We're going to go home proud, every one of you having made that link. There's a simple word that sums it all up. One simple word. And it's what Wallace stands for. And every people, everywhere in the planet, recognise that one simple word. It does not need to be dressed up. It does not need to be something to be ashamed of as you speak that word. It's a simple word. It's synonymous with the man himself, and you all know it. And that word is freedom.
Freedom!
I have brought you to the ring. Now dance the best you can.
Here, here.
Before you go, turn, look at it. His eyes saw it just as you see it today. Embed it in your memory and never, ever forget. Thanks.
When we walked out of Westminster Hall and I saw the crowds in the street, people from all over the world, Australians, Canadians, there was even people from Alaska, all of Scots blood of course, and the pipes went up and we set off to walk through the streets of London, 700 years to the day, following the route that Wallace was dragged. It was spectacular.
Never think you'd see the day. Freedom!
When the march pulled into Smithfield where Wallace was actually butchered, the amount of people gathered there waiting on us was, again, just jaw-dropping. I didn't expect it. And a band of whom I'm a great fan called Clan and Drumma, it's Gaelic for Children of the Drum. They set up a salvo, a barrage of drums and pipes, and just got that Scottish blood that was gathered there boiling in its veins.
I see a whole army of my countrymen and women before me, and they do not flee. I'm sure that every single one of you realises in your hearts what this means. I'm not going to say too much here. I'll save it for the church. I'll save it for what I've already said in Westminster Hall. But you stand here 700 years to the day, perhaps to the very minute, that William Wallace breathed his last. Do you think Wallace could ever have envisaged us here in our hundreds, standing on the spot in central London? What goes around, comes around. All men die. Not all men really live. Wallace lived and died for Scotland. For too long, the leaders in Scotland have buried their heads when it comes to us as a nation state. William is the figurehead, but tens of thousands of Scots have died over the centuries to try and set their country free. We owe those tens of thousands big time. We owe William Wallace. And let us hope that what he began will end in our lifetimes, to see Scotland stand on a world stage as a nation, a proud nation state again. There is one word synonymous with the life of William Wallace. You all know it. It's simple, but it doesn't need to be wrapped up. And I'm going to say it, and I want you all to shout it. And you let Wallace hear this in heaven, because he's up there and he's looking down, and I want him to hear you say it right after me. Let it echo through London. I want to hear it. Freedom. Let me hear it. Thank you. Now we're going to have one or two wee things done, and then Clan and Drumma are going to let them see here what Celtic passion and spirit are all about. Primeval and from the soul.
Scots way with Wallace bled, Scots what grows as half-time bread. Welcome to your gory bed, on to victory. Now's the day and now's the hour, see the front of battle hour, see approach broad Edward's tower, chains and slavery.
We are all here to pay tribute to the memory of William Wallace. This service will in some ways resemble a funeral service because he never received one, and it's never too late to right wrongs. But this is also an opportunity, this day, to celebrate the legacy of William Wallace, to reflect upon Wallace's life and his achievement, and to remember those who still, 700 years on, experience the evil of oppression. The psalmist says, "Cast your burden upon the Lord, and he will sustain you." This day and this service gives us an opportunity to share our own reflections, and I'm sure that over the course of the day you will share with many others what William Wallace means to you. But we've invited some special guests to share from their heart their own personal reflections on Wallace and his meaning. And we're delighted to welcome Fiona Watson of Stirling University in the first of our reflections on the life of Wallace. Wallace, a man for all seasons? Fiona.
To me, Wallace has given us two things, two interconnected things. He is, of course, an inspiration, and he is an inspiration because he was extraordinary. And I'm talking about the man at the time. This was a man we should never have heard of, never have seen his name in any history books or remember 700 years on. And yet, he was a man who knew what he wanted and would never stop until he had got it. And if he couldn't get it, he would give his all. I don't think that, I'll go on in a minute to talk about the Wallace that became after Wallace died, but I think that those two things are both Wallace the man and Wallace the later and greater myth. We don't even know who he was, despite the discussions about Elderslie. Now, we don't really know who his parents were or where he came from. We do know that, of course, he won the Battle of Stirling Bridge along with Andrew Murray and became Guardian of Scotland. And that when he lost the Battle of Falkirk, he didn't stop there. He harried the English garrison at Stirling Castle. And when he could no longer do that, he went abroad and argued Scotland's case in the continent. And then he came back and rejoined the Scottish Army in 1303 as Scotland desperately continued to resist Edward I, despite the fact that the king, John Balliol, in whose name Wallace fought, did not look as if he would come home. And then, in 1304, when everybody else in Scotland decided that peace, one way or another, was necessary, he continued and, of course, paid the ultimate price. In the aftermath of Wallace's death, almost immediately, I would imagine, in the hearts and minds of Scottish people, he took root as something enduring, despite the decisions that had been made. And of course, in the 15th century, Blind Harry wrote down a Wallace that, to be honest, bears very little. He doesn't, in fact, reflect much about the real Wallace, but in spirit, undoubtedly does. And Blind Harry's Wallace was, of course, the second most important book in Scotland after the Bible. It was the one that everybody had and presumably everybody read at every moment of national crisis. 100 and so years ago, it would have been the done thing to build the Wallace Monument at Stirling, to build a big statue. Now, in 2005, thanks to David Ross, we've done something a little bit more personal. And we have come to give Wallace the memorial service that he never had. So I would like to go back to the last months of Wallace's life and remind us that though Blind Harry gave us a super Wallace, a superhuman man who did everything apparently in the Wars of Independence, and a bit like Mary Queen of Scots, probably never slept in the same bed. It was all over Scotland. Let's go back to the real man. who in 1304 with a few comrades decided that could not face the thought of Scotland submitting to Edward I. But we must remember that all the rest of Scotland did. And these are not just the nobles. All across Scotland, Scotland decided differently, whether we like it or not. After the capture of Stirling Castle, even those closest to Wallace, still with him, submitted to Edward, and he was on his own. And from then on, of course, he was a hunted fugitive, finding shelter where he could, but perhaps knowing that it was only a matter of time until he was indeed found, handed over to the English, and brought to London. And I just want to reflect and think about what it must have been like to be Wallace today, as we've all those on the march will have been doing. And to remember that, unlike us today, he was on his own. He came here on his own. And he must have thought that he was a failure. But I think we today know that he was not.
Well, friends, I suppose my first thought is I don't think there's anywhere I would rather be today than in this magnificent ancient church. And we thank the rector of St Bartholomew's so much for the hospitality that he's showing to us today. My first thought is an impish, I don't think an irreverent one, but certainly an impish one, and that is 700 years on, and William Wallace still has the establishment scarce stiff. See, what we should note is the absence of any official commemoration planned for today, the anniversary of the execution, the judicial murder of Scotland's greatest hero. An event is marked by this service today, by the Society of William Wallace, by David Ross's efforts over these past few weeks, indeed over these past few years. It's marked by the many grassroots Wallace societies, the Length and Breadth for Scotland. It's marked by a number of local authorities who've organised events, but it's not marked by any official or governmental celebration or commemoration. A couple of weeks ago I was at the Society of William Wallace Free Colliers in Wollaston, near Polmont. And since 1861, they've been marching in commemoration of Wallace up the hill to Wollaston, where Wallace looked at the armies assembling before the Battle of Falkirk. The Society of Free Colliers was a pre-trade union trade union. It was a combination. But before there were trade unions, they organised a society, and the society was there to protect the free rights of colliers who previously had been serfs. And when that first society was formed, they took as its name the name of Scotland's greatest hero, William Wallace. And they've been celebrating Wallace, they've been celebrating their freedom from serfdom since 1861. And events like that are taking place, the length and breadth of Scotland, but not official, governmental pageantry. And the contrast with the recent Trafalgar celebrations is rather telling. It was celebrated by official pageantry and fairly limited public participation. But everything that's taking place today is taking place as what the people have organised for ourselves. The Scottish Executive have organised precisely nothing. I think tomb tabards is the phrase that comes to mind. And it was ever thus, because when the Wallace Monument was built in the 19th century, every penny piece was raised by public subscription. And when the film Braveheart was produced 10 years ago, most of the establishment were horrified. And yet the film went on to triumph and to international acclaim, and the story of Wallace was restored to a new generation of Scots. But the irony is that the more the authorities and the establishment of the day, through history, have tried to suppress the story of William Wallace, the more the legend has grown in the hearts of the people. The English chroniclers of the 13th and 14th century described Wallace as a bloodthirsty brigand, not as a national leader. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered as a traitor to Edward I, a monarch to whom he had never sworn allegiance. However, the more he was dismissed and defamed, the more powerful the Wallace legend became. From the 15th century onwards, it was bred into Scots with their mother's milk. And as Fiona has already told us, the cornerstone text was the writings of Henry the Minstrel, Blind Harry. Now, Blind Harry came from Linlithgow, as do I. In fact, I'm a black bitch, which means I was born within the sound of St Michael's bells, but confirms everything my political opponents have ever thought about me. And as a black bitch, as a lad growing up in Linlithgow, I got from my grandfather's knee the stories of Wallace and Bruce and the Wars of Independence. I like to think that it was perhaps an oral tradition stretching right back to Blind Harry. It may have been, I suppose, the New Scots translation of Blind Harry's work in the 18th century. It may even have been Walter Scott's Tales from my Grandfather's Knee, but nonetheless, the stories were alive. And just like Blind Harry does, when my grandfather told me the stories of what had gone on in Linlithgow and the Wars of Independence, he told me not just the story, he told me the dates, the times, the venue, the names of the people who'd taken part. So when he described the storming of Linlithgow Castle at that time, he said there was a couple of Davidsons there, some Grants and the Oliphants. Now, Oliphants were the local bakers in Linlithgow, still are. So in my mind's eye, I had this impression of the bakers dusting down the flour and charging up to the palace and storming in with a haycart stuck in the portcullis. And the story came alive to me, as it did, of course, to Scotland's national poet, Robert Burns, who said, "The first books I have ever read in private, and which gave me more pleasure than any books I have ever read again, were The Life of Hannibal and the History of Sir William Wallace. The story of Wallace poured a Scottish prejudice in my veins, which will boil along there till the floodgates of life shut in eternal rest." I know exactly how Burns felt, and the story of Wallace, of course, resonates through Burns's poetry. Centuries later, 200 years later, it was this poem again which provided the basis for the Braveheart screenplay. Braveheart was the first Hollywood epic which was actually written in the 15th century. It was written by a Canadian, Randall Wallace, but Randall Wallace told me exactly where he got the inspiration from, and therefore the controversy that followed the release of Braveheart, people saying it wasn't historically accurate, was quite amazing, because people who didn't actually know about the existence of Blind Harry's text, never mind the history, they thought wasn't particularly accurate. Of course, the essence of the story, with some embellishment here and there, was absolutely true, as are the reasons for Wallace's continuing appeal. He was a leader who emerged from out with the magic circle of aristocracy. He emerged to inspire a nation. He sought no personal gain, but fought as a guardian of Scotland, or more accurately, as a guardian of the community of the realm of Scotland, for a King John Balliol who was not fit to lace his boots. And when Scotland's establishment leaders bargained and sold, it was Wallace's uncompromising patriotism which saved the nation from surrender and annihilation. It's why his memory has been revered by the common people of Scotland. He died a martyr's death, as Christ did, but still refusing to bow the knee. And after his death, he provided the platform for the struggle to be carried forward to victory by the hero King Robert Bruce. Now, generation after generation of Scots learned this epic story, and they were inspired. And when our children had this history withheld from them at school, and when popular oral tradition gave way for television, along came the Hollywood blockbuster and brought the story back to life for young Scots. Now, at the premiere of Braveheart, Randall Wallace told me exactly how he'd come to visit the Wallace Monument in Bridge of Allan. He was thinking about, he'd seen the statue of William Wallace at Edinburgh, and that's where he first got the idea of the screenplay, and he thought he'd better research somebody who bore his name and who obviously had been an important figure. He went to the Wallace Monument, he was trying to find the entrance. Those of you who know it can know that can be quite difficult depending on where you're coming from. And he saw a couple of young lads down the road and he said, "How do I get into the Wallace Monument?" He said, "It's up there, mister, just go up there and turn right." And then he said to him, "Who was William Wallace?" And he didn't know. And what he said to me was at that moment he swore to himself that once he'd finished, there was no young Scot, there was hardly a young person in the world who wouldn't know who William Wallace was. And so after that, and since then, Wallace's historical victory has been almost complete. Next to no youngster in England knows anything about the history of Wallace's greatest protagonist, Edward I, the deeds of the most successful and ruthless of the Plantagenet kings are lost in the history books. In contrast, the story of Wallace is a factor, certainly was a factor, in spurring on the nation to the restoration of our own national parliament. And so Wallace has triumphed in the minds of the common people, and therefore it's perhaps appropriate that it's the common people who demand that his memory be properly honoured. And in reflection, I suspect Wallace would have preferred it that way, preferred to be remembered not in official pageantry and celebration, but by the genuine effort of people the length and breadth of Scotland. However, I think we should make two efforts to take that memory forward. Firstly, let us have a determination. Let's have a solemn vow in the current review of our national curriculum in Scotland to ensure that Scottish history and the history of Wallace is offered to every child in our nation. But that doesn't happen yet. 6 years after the restoration of our national parliament should be a source of shame to every adult Scot. And secondly, not just this anniversary, but from now on every anniversary, August the 23rd, let us make sure that the saltire, the flag of Scotland, flies from every public building in Scotland. And not at half-mast, but high and proud in the celebration of the life of a man without whom, or with whom, Scotland, the nation, now lives. Earlier on, Fiona, in her excellent address, said that we don't know Wallace. And in historical terms, in terms of the facts we know about his life, that's certainly true. Wallace probably means the Welshman, which probably means, like many national leaders, not too few many generations back, he came from out with the nation. As Bruce was a Norman, albeit a Gaelic Norman. We should reflect on that, perhaps. But we actually do know Wallace. Every time somebody does the right thing, by themselves, or more importantly, by the nation, we know Wallace. And our minister today said this was a funeral service, and it's right and proper we celebrate and commemorate in this way, in this magnificent session. But Wallace, in a deeper sense, doesn't need a funeral, because he's not dead. Wallace lives on. He lives on in the topography of Scotland. He lives on the place names, whether they be hills or forests or mountains or caves, which are named after him, the length and breadth of our country. He is in the very stains of Scotland. But more importantly, he lives on in the hearts and the minds of the common people of Scotland.
as long as 100 of us remain alive. History repeats itself. I think of Wallace's last moments, far from home, alone, the pain, the agony. He would never have been able to envisage this. And in his extremity of an agony you just cannot comprehend, he looked upon this place, a house of God, and perhaps when his heart was torn out and his life ended, some shade of the man, some shade flew in here to sanctuary and looks down upon us today. Can you feel his presence? Is he here? He's within us all, certainly. I've heard Wallace described as a loser. It's already been mentioned how Christ suffered agonies. Would we call Christ a loser? The great line, of course, is that all men die, not all men really live. Wallace lived and died for Scotland. And there are people here from all over the planet. The blood of Scotland is here from South Africa, Australia, Canada, Alaska. People from all over the world wanted to come. It was hard to say no to a lot of people. And why does Scotland hold its children in such thrall? And it does hold us in thrall. Those who have been away from Scotland for generations still feel its pull. I've got a wee something in this bag. Soil. Soil of Scotland. These atoms are the atoms of my people, of my ancestors. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Just soil gathered up from Scotland. But it's where we come from. It's our wee bit of soil. And it's where we will all eventually go. And I'm telling you this right now. If I die anywhere else, you all better make sure I get brought home. Anywhere, as soon as it says Scotland, that just says home to me. And the very soil of Scotland is what we are. The very atoms. As you walk across the soil of Scotland, you're walking across the ancestors of 1,000 generations of those who have gone before. And it pulls. And it pulls the people who are here today from all over the planet who have made their own way here for reasons deep inside them, primeval. The very soil of Scotland. And a lot of Wallace was denied that. Wallace was denied going back to the atoms from whence he came. And as I said, I don't want to be buried in some corner of a far-off foreign field that will forever be Scotland if I'm there. Bring me home. Wallace would have wanted to come home. That's why that coffin's down there. He has always been there for me. Sometimes I doubt my own convictions. We all do, whether it's religion, whether it's politics. We sometimes question ourselves and ask the rights and wrongs. And sometimes I ask the rights and wrongs of Scotland within my head. And there's always one name comes back to bolster it. Wallace. Caledonia has been all I ever had. And it's enough. I don't want any more. I want freedom. And if I can at least lay one of our greatest sons to rest in the soil that he would like to have been buried in, that's enough. Caledonia, Scotland. We all spring from it. It belongs to every one of us. And Wallace's spirit deserves to come home. Thanks.
After all this time to Caledonia skies, to the country I died for, so that survive. Once again to stand beside the people I hold dear. For Scotland, St. Andrew, and freedom. I'm coming home, I'm coming home, back where I belong. I'm coming home, I'm coming home, my spirit's gone home to Scotland, St. Andrew, and freedom. To Scotland, St. Andrew, and freedom.
I watched that coffin go by, and I believed that the spirit of Wallace was within it. And every single person I've spoken to since that was in the church said, Dave, I believed he was there. I believed he was in that coffin. And it was such a solemn event that, of course, there needed to be a foil to that. And so we had a wake, a good Scottish wake, in the Welsh Centre in London that night, with music, drink, laughter. And as everybody knows, there's much more fun at a Scottish wake than there is at an English wedding. The coffin was finally carried into Lanark on September the 11th, 2005, which was the 708th anniversary of Wallace's victory at Stirling Bridge to the very day. And the people that turned out in Lanark, the streets were jam-packed. And nobody saw it in any way as being contrived. They really believed this was something spectacular to them too. People queued for over an hour just to touch the coffin. There was a queue that went right down the main street, and people just filed by, just like they would anything, anyone lying in state. They filed by that coffin to drop things, messages in, to touch it. Every face deadly serious.
The spirit of Wallace is the spirit of Scotland. This homecoming belongs to everyone in Scotland. You are the spirit of Scotland, and that is very important to remember. For centuries, for 700 years, we didn't really have a focus point in Scotland for Wallace. We now have one, which will be in Lanark. Now, it hasn't been built yet. It will be built, and I'd like to think that it's not going to take 5 years like it did with the Scottish Parliament. I don't think that William Wallace will be wanting for that long. And it will be in Lanark for all to come, not to worship, but to relate to remember what this man died for. He died for freedom, for the right of Scotland to be a sovereign country, equal to all other countries in Christendom. And that is very important even today. Even today, this is not a political event, but one has to remember that what the man died for 700 years ago, when you come here to view the spirit of Wallace, remember, this is the spirit of Scotland, and that spirit resides within you all, each and one of you, whether you're a Scot at home or a Scot over the water. Remember that. Fight for it. It's important. Let's not lose it. Thank you.
Fellow Scots, friends and guests, the spirit of Wallace has journeyed far and has now come home. In a few moments, the last stage of that journey will be made to St Kentigern's Kirk. It is laudable that a hero is remembered, but how much more honour is rendered when the very essence of that man is embedded in the hearts and souls of all true Scots. Honour where honour is due, but even more so when we take heed of the reality of the Wallace. He not only fought for, but died for freedom.
Oh, Flora, Scotland, come on, and will we see our light again? And fall and die for your weed and hill and glen, and stood against him. Come on, our men will tarry and send him home to think again. Those days are past now, and in the past they must remain. A bit louder than that, come on. But we can still rise now and be a nation again that stood against him. Our men will tarry and send him home with him.
David Ross, I mean, fair play to that man. I mean, he's done so much, and I don't think he actually is appreciated as much as what he should be. I love the big guy, I really do love the big guy, but he's not as pretty as me.
Well, as I say, you just look at the people that's here, you know, that's come out and turned out for David as well, because what he's done, the walk for Wallace to London, etc., it was just a phenomenal achievement to do that. It's quite a hike, you know, from Glasgow all the way down there, walking in the footsteps of the man himself, you know. It's a phenomenal achievement, and he should be very, very proud of what he's done and what he's put together here today.
And David, we'll still be a bit nervous about it because he's always fearing the worst, but it's gone great, and it couldn't have been better, and he'll be well pleased within himself. And later on, when the crowds have all faded away, he'll sit down and he'll enjoy himself a good drink.
You know, this man walked 450 miles at 700 kilometers, had blister feet, and he walked an average of about 25 to 33 miles per day. Not many people can do this.
Something like 2,500 people filing through the streets, most of them with blazing torches, and to see that, just that passion, that special something was brought out in all these people. And it wasn't just me. It was everyone who came in contact with that coffin. It really, really meant something to them.
It's strange to think that 5 years' work is finally finished, and to be quite honest, I don't know what I'm going to do when I wake up tomorrow. I've got a book to finish, of course, but it's strange because 5 years working, for the last 2 months, we walk into London and everything I've done, it's going to be strange to go back to normality, to be quite honest. But people have had a good time, and this isn't about me, it's about people, and people have had a great time today, and the smiling faces, and they're so proud of their Scottishness, and it means something to them. That makes it.
I did not close my eyes for the last time under Caledonia's skies, with my good friends gathered all around me to say their last goodbyes. But I will not be forgotten in the heart of every Scot. I still live on. Now it's time to fly the Saltire high. My spirit's coming home. They tore apart my body so I could not rise on Judgment Day. What they did not realize is now I'll never go away. I'm coming back to the land I love, to the people I hold dear. It's Scotland, St. Andrew, and freedom. I'm coming home, back where I belong. I'm coming home. My spirit's coming home. I'm returning after all this time. Caledonia skies, to the country we died for, so that our nation could survive. Once again to stand beside the people I hold dear. For Scotland, St. Andrew, and freedom. I'm coming home.
I'll always carry a piece of Wallace in my heart. I forged a bond with the man himself. That is what this has done for me, just like it has done with so many people. But I think the overriding theme of all this is that 700 years ago, the English tried to extinguish the flame that was Wallace. And 7 centuries on, we've made sure that flame will burn brighter than ever.
My spirit's coming home to Scotland, St. Andrew, and freedom. To Scotland, St. Andrew, and freedom. For days I have walked across the moorland, leaving far behind the glen where I was born, and a frightened crying woman carrying my child. I trust in God that I will live to hold my son. man. We give our all here today, so our children can say, this is our land, and we are Scotland's son.